So today we're going to wrap up the second part of session 2. Really for this part, we're going to be focused on some of the, I would say the foundational technical SEO things when it comes to just making sure your website is well optimized for Google and the search engines.
Okay.
So the first thing here is the robots.txt file. And simply the robots.txt file, it's pretty much instructions to Google's search crawlers, and pretty much it gives it instructions and code on how to crawl your website. So
Okay.
it's pretty simple. I would say for the majority of websites, if you use Yoast, you'll be able to generate a robots.txt file pretty easily, and then from there you'll
Okay.
just submit it to Google Search Console. So I'll show you how to do that here in a bit. Um, just a few things before we get into the demonstration. So this is a standard robots.txt file. So you're going to include a link to your sitemaps. And so we'll go into sitemaps here next. And then it's pretty much going to say you're going to have a disallow statement and allow statement. So your disallow is basically telling Google's crawlers, hey, Google, I have this URL on my website, but I don't want you to crawl it. And this is
Okay.
typically going to be reserved for pages that you don't want showing up in Google. So, for instance, WordPress, I don't want the direct URL to my WordPress admin to show up in Google because that can
Okay.
create, security risk with my website. Um, just maybe some other things, if you had, let's say, a private community where your customers or your community members were paying maybe a monthly fee
Like a
or to
paywall.
exactly.
Okay.
Maybe you'll include those there because you don't want those showing up to the public, but only to people who are actually paying for access.
Okay.
Allow. So for this one, this basically is going to be all of my URLs. Sometimes you'll just see this as a forward slash. It's pretty much the same thing here. Um, Kind of moving on here to the next one. So yeah, here's an example where we're just using a forward slash. Now, one thing that you want to be aware of, and again, if you use Yoast to generate your site or your robots.txt file, you won't have to worry about this. But if it said, for example, disallow colon, and then it just had this forward slash, that would
Uh-huh.
basically be telling Google that, hey, I don't want any page on my website to be crawled. And so
Okay.
while that's important is that if the Google doesn't crawl any of the pages on your website, there's no chance that they're going to rank because they're not going to be not
Right.
even going to be indexed, right? So that's a common thing I see, especially for new websites. And I'll have a business owner come to me and, hey, we launched the website a year ago. None of our pages are showing in Google. And then, of course, I'll look at the robots.txt file, and they have a disallow statement and just a forward slash here. So just something to kind of keep in mind. So
Could
moving
you just go
on.
delete that?
So what you would typically do, yeah, delete it, add things that actually should not be showing up in Google. So like, for example, this is a common um, slug that you would want to add here because most of
Okay.
the time I would think for most websites, you would not want this showing up in Google. But it's really dependent on your website and, the pages on your site.
Okay.
Yeah. And I guess, kind of generalize it a bit, anything that you want to keep private, make it disallow, and then anything that you want public, make sure that it's under allow.
Okay.
Yeah. And so kind of jumping over here to my browser. Okay, so if you have Yoast that's installed on your WordPress site, this is really easy to generate the robots.txt files. It actually does it for you. So all you're
So
going to
I think
do,
I have the basic version of Yoast.
okay, that's fine.
Is this basic too? Oh yeah, because on the site it says Yoast Premium. So is this basic then?
Yeah, this is for this site. Yeah, I'm only using the basic
Okay.
version.
I'll be fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you'll be fine. Yeah, so you're just going to go find Yoast here on the left-hand side. You're going to go to Tools, and let's click Do so you can see where you're going to click from the Tools menu. So once you're in the Tools menu, you're just going to go to the File Editor. Let me zoom in here. But yeah, so you're just going to go to the Files Editor.
Okay.
Okay. And yeah, so you'll pretty much come to this screen and it's going to pretty much auto-populate it for you. So again, just double check this allow part, make sure there's nothing weird going on.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So once you have your robots.txt file, all you do now, you're going to
So
actually,
real fast on the disallow, if there were more pages I want to add,
mhm.
do I just do a comma space and then the slug, or
Yeah, so
is there a different way to add them?
so typically what you would do is just like, just to make it easier to read, just add some line breaks and then, you know, page
Oh, so it doesn't
here.
matter.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then, yeah, I'll just add a line break just to make it easier to read.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Great question. So yeah, so Yoast, you'll just save the robots.txt file here. And it'll take a few seconds to save, or more than a few seconds.
You're good.
um, let's see here. Yep, so you're going to just save it to make sure it's updated. And then we're going to go over to Google Search Console. And
Okay.
so I will share the link to get to this part. It can be difficult to find.
Okay.
But this is basically like Google's free robots.texting tool. And basically, it's a great way just to verify that there aren't any issues with your robots.txt. So
Okay.
just make sure that you pick the right website in your Google Search Console, and then from there, typically this is going to auto-populate, but for whatever reason, if it doesn't, if this is your first time doing it, then just copy and paste what's here over into this panel here.
Okay.
And then once you do that, just hit test. So allowed. So really, what I would do here is just put in some of your most important URLs to make sure that the robots.txt file isn't doing anything weird. And then just check for this message allowed. So I just did my homepage here just as an example, but for you, I would definitely do my homepage, my main blog page, probably my category pages, and my individual product pages.
Okay.
And then, once you're good there, just hit submit. So yeah, I would say it's always just kind of good to have the file saved to your computer or wherever you're saving files. Don't have to worry about this. And then, yeah, just hit submit.
Is there a reason that you need to save it if it's in Yoast?
You mean for step one here?
Yeah.
No reason, no real reason. It's just I like personally just like having like a backup in case something goes weird with my website, like my website
Gotcha.
breaks or something. So yeah, it's just kind of my personal preference. But yeah, if you have it in Yoast, then that's really good enough.
Okay.
So yeah, so once you do that, that's pretty much all there is to it as far as your
Okay.
robots.txt. Um,
So
so
is that a place where I could go and have like that loft page that came up removed, like so that Google doesn't crawl it?
exactly. So yeah,
Okay.
you can add that slug here for
Okay.
disallow, and yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It'll tell Google not to crawl it.
That makes sense.
All right. Anything else before we move on to sitemaps?
I don't think so. That's good.
All right. So sitemaps. So I guess kind of recap robots.txt. Basically, the robots.txt file is giving Google's search crawlers instructions on how to crawl your website. A sitemap is somewhat related, but it's not, it's not the same thing. So think about if you just landed or just arrived in a new city you've never been to before, you'll probably either, try to find a map or pull up a map on your phone,
Uh-huh.
so that you know how to navigate the city, so you can get the most out of your time there.
Right.
A sitemap for a website pretty much um, is that map for Google. So you're pretty much telling Google, hey, this is what's on my website. This is, how I want to be shown on Google. And basically, it's going to be several or a group of URLs that's included in that sitemap.
Okay.
So for number one, you just want to make sure that your most important pages from your website. So again, your category pages, your home page, blog pages, and individual product pages. You want to make sure that those URLs are in that sitemap. And then again, like you said, for the lost page, you definitely want to make sure it's not there. So you
Okay.
want to make sure to remove it. Other than that, you want to categorize your content by specifying the home page, category pages, and subcategory pages. So typically this will be done automatically. Again, we're going to use Yoast to generate the sitemap, but
Okay.
you just want to make sure that, you know, that's there in the sitemap.
Okay.
Um, so for your sitemap, there are actually two versions. You're going to have the XML sitemap. So this is basically one way, putting it into XML format is really probably preferred because it is definitely more suited to how Google is crawling your site, at least here in
Okay.
2020. But you should also create a HTML sitemap. This is really kind of a old school thing. Back when all websites were just HTML, you didn't have any of the fancy stuff going on. But still, you might have that one user out of 100 who looks for your sitemap on your website. And
Yeah.
usually you're going to put this on your footer because it's not super important. But again, if that one person comes to your site, you do want to make it available.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, like I mentioned, you don't want to include URLs. So again, like you're at that lost page, you want to make sure that it's not included in the sitemap. And then you want to ensure that your sitemap, you submit it to Google Search Console. So we're about
Okay.
to get into all of that right now. So again, going back to Yoast. So for this part, again, you're going to go to the Yoast section here in the left navigation panel, and then you're going to go to General. And
Okay.
then once you're in General, and yeah, so this is also available in the free version of Yoast, so you don't need
Okay.
to upgrade. But yeah, go to General, go to the Features tab, and then Yoast automatically generates a XML sitemap for your website. So you'll just go here. I'll just open in a new tab. And so I have several sitemaps for this particular website for different types of content. But typically you're not going to have this many, just maybe a few. Um, and so we just open one of these. So these are basically all of my pages on my site. So
Okay.
these are just pages. So yeah, I would just go through this again, make sure that anything that's there, it should be there. And if, again, there's something you don't want showing up, just make sure that it's removed.
And
And so
then
that,
remove from the um, use it with the robots.txt file.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So one benefit of using Yoast is that you don't have to do that manually. So, if you have your sitemap and you have your robots.txt file, Yoast will automatically put your sitemap URLs here at the top of the robots.txt. So you don't even have to think about it. But if for whatever reason you're doing this manually, then just remember to include URLs to your sitemap.
So should you look at this first, the sitemap, before you do the robots.txt file?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, yeah, I
Just
would
to save yourself from having to upload it to Google My Business again, right?
right. I
Or
think that's a
or
yeah, I
Google
think that
Search Console.
yeah, Google search. Yeah, I think that's definitely the better way to go about it. Do sitemap first, then do the robots.txt. So good,
Okay.
good, good, good observation. Um, so yeah, so that's pretty much it there. So once you have your sitemap, so you want to take the main URL here. So
Uh-huh.
this is it right here. And so
Uh-huh.
we only want the part after the forward slash. So that's going to be sitemap underscore index.xml.
Okay.
So we're going to go over here to Google Search Console. And so, yeah, you're just going to go to your property here, and then
Uh-huh.
you're going to go to the sitemap section, and then
Okay.
you're just going to enter that second part there.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, it just submitted actually like yesterday. But yeah, let's just do it again.
So this is like an updated one, right?
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, I typically wouldn't do this step, unless I added new content to my site, which I did yesterday. But let's say, if you're not really adding any new content, I this make sure you do it like the first time, and every time after you're adding content or updating content, go back and resubmit your sitemap.
So every time you're adding content or updating content. So every time you do like a big update to your site, you want to update the sitemaps.
Yes, that's what I recommend.
Okay, because I'm in mine right now, and it looks like my SEO person has done a few.
Okay.
So
As far as website updates or submitting the sitemap.
this sitemaps, because
Okay.
like it looks like there's like a post sitemap, page sitemap, product sitemap.
hmm You want to share your
Uh,
screen?
yeah.
Let's see. Go for it.
Where'd you go? There it is. You have disabled it.
Huh. Let's see. Okay. There we go. Okay, you should be good now.
There we go. Okay. Are you seeing it?
I do. So, yeah, so it looks like it was submitted on May 20th, so like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Um,
Yeah.
and I guess, yeah, the last red column actually just shows you the last time that it was, I guess, crawled.
Okay.
So, yeah, I guess, kind of going back to my point, you want to, yeah, anytime you're updating content or adding new content, yeah, just, submit your sitemap. So, and really the point
Okay.
there, Spencer, is that you want Google to see that newer, updated version of your site as soon as possible. So that's why we're submitting a sitemap.
So if I'm like adding a blog post, is that enough to have to submit a sitemap?
In that case, I would just submit it to be crawled. I
Okay.
mean, you can, it definitely wouldn't hurt anything, but I mean like, major things like maybe you've added several new products or,
Okay.
you've maybe did a pretty major site redesign, things
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And you may want to, if you can share again, I wanted to check out the error that you're getting. Let's see.
Right here.
So yeah, just click it. Um, hmm.
Probably some she uploaded.
Yeah, it's probably like a missing bracket somewhere. That's
Right.
what I get from it. Okay, nothing I would say major.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
And
'cause
I
it's
can
like
follow up on it too.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
So, like, I'm curious, like, because there's a bunch of different ones
Hmm.
that were
Yep.
submitted. So, what changes the slug?
Yeah, so if you notice, the first one are for your posts. So this is specifically for your blog pages,
Gotcha.
whereas the second one, that's going to be, I call them static pages, but pretty much everything that's not a blog post. And then
Uh-huh.
your product category, yeah, just that's going to be your product category pages. And I imagine, yeah, you have a product, so that's for your individual products. Yeah.
So, I guess, so when you pulled up the sitemap, though, like on yours, it just had one URL slug, right?
No,
So, just, or
so it
did I
actually,
miss?
yeah, so it actually had multiple.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll share it.
Okay.
I'll show you one more time here. So yeah, so if I go here, um, yeah, so this is my main sitemap.
Oh,
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah, so I have several here.
So you have several. So if I were submitting like that second one down, I would just pull the slug after the slash and then submit that.
Is exactly. Yep,
Okay,
exactly.
okay, okay. Because we took it out of the search bar, so I was thinking they were just that was the one for all of these.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So when you're using Yoast, you can actually just click through if it's easier.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
then yeah, and you can kind of see like
Gotcha.
the detailed, I guess,
Okay.
version. Yep. Yeah. Uh, so those are XML sitemaps. Now the other thing I mentioned, HTML sitemaps. So I just use a
Right.
tool to generate this.
Okay.
So I'll share this in the session notes so that you'll have
Okay.
or you'll have the link to it. But yeah, it's pretty easy. So you'll let's see if I can open the main page. Yeah, so what you'll do is just enter your website URL, select HTML sitemap, and then go to creation.
Okay.
And it'll take maybe a few minutes to generate that sitemap, but you'll get a screen like this once it's finished. Download it, and then I highly recommend having your developer or someone who's comfortable modifying the footer files for your site.
Okay.
So what they're going to do is upload this file, this robots, or that's something else. But yeah, you'll download it, and that file is actually going to be an HTML file. So from there, you're going to upload that file to your root directory. So
Okay.
that's usually going to be your cPanel or whatever hosting you're using. And yeah, if you tell your developer, they should know exactly what to do. And then from
Okay.
there, you'll want them to add a link. So I'll show you just a quick example. So you'll just want them to add a link to it
Okay.
here in the footer. So you see here, I just call this sitemap, and
Gotcha.
yeah, I'll just link to it. And that's pretty much it for the HTML sitemap. Um,
Okay.
and you can also submit it here to Google Search Console.
Okay.
No, I just do it XML because that's usually good enough. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with submitting the HTML version here as well.
Does that help you at all to have both versions?
Um, it doesn't necessarily add anything. I think XML is most important, at least when you're submitting
Okay.
it here. But like I mentioned, you might have that one visitor out of 1,000 who's looking for the sitemap to the site. So
Right. Okay.
that's really why we added to the site there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is a reason that like one visitor out of 1,000 would want to see that?
Yeah. I think this is probably more relevant if it's like a huge website where there's a ton of pages,
Okay.
and they don't want to go through your menus on your page to find what they're looking for. That HTML sitemap is basically like a directory of all the pages on your site. So what they might do is go to the HTML sitemap, maybe do like a control find to look for exactly what they're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's just say, if you were a clothing retailer and you had an e-commerce website, but you
Uh-huh.
had a ton of pages. So maybe that person would go to your HTML sitemap and really like try to find the shoes pages or the main shoes page. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so that's one application. Honestly, I don't know of many others,
Okay.
but if you have a huge website, it just kind of helps the user navigate your site better, or it provides
Okay.
an option. Yep.
So, in like the scheme of things, how important are like sitemaps and the robot text file and all those things? Because won't Google eventually just crawl it themselves?
True. Yes, they Google will eventually crawl the website themselves, but it's very important that you control that process as much as
Okay.
possible. So robots.txt file again, if you have the situation where you're blocking all of the pages on your website, you need to make sure that that's resolved, and that
Okay.
Google knows exactly how to crawl your site. And you brought up the perfect example with your lofts page. You don't want that showing up, so you need to tell Google, hey, remove this from the search engine results.
Okay.
As far as the sitemap, yeah, so Google will eventually find your website, but that could take a long time. What I've
Okay.
found is that having a sitemap usually gets your pages index faster. So let's
Okay.
say if you this week publish a blog post, I would imagine you would want that blog post to be indexed as quickly as possible. And having a
Right.
sitemap already there, it's going to make it more efficient for Google to crawl it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that
That
answer your
makes
question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, so um, yeah, that's pretty much it on sitemaps and robots.txt files. Now, before
Okay.
we move forward, pop question, what's the difference between a sitemap and a robots.txt?
Well, both of them tell, well, so the robots.txt tells what to crawl and what not to crawl, and
Okay,
then the sitemap gives priority to the pages, I guess.
perfect. Yeah, so sitemap priority to the pages, and it's pretty much a map of your website. So,
Right. Okay.
yeah, great. So moving on, this is going to be the last section of the session two, part two. I just kind of
Okay.
want to go over some quick kind of conversion rate optimization things, namely site speed and mobile friendliness. So site speed, very important. I'm sure you've had the experience where you went to a website, it was really slow to load. Maybe you got frustrated and then you eventually left the website.
Right.
Maybe, yeah. So
I
that's
think
why it's
mine currently does that. So,
yeah. So I ran a little report on on the site, so we'll get into that on the next slide. Um,
okay.
So site speed, again, very important for the usability of your website. And then as far as SEO, Google really prioritizes those sites that are user friendly. So
Okay.
one kind of component of user friendliness is how quickly your website loads. So overall, I'll start from the bottom here. The target for your site should be 3 seconds or less for the overall load time. And then
Okay.
there are two specific metrics that you should pay attention to. Time
Okay.
to first byte should be, a half a second or less. And basically, this is the time it takes for the browser to receive the first byte of your website. And
Okay.
from what we've found is that that's usually going to dictate that number, that third point there about the 3 seconds or less. That's going to be like the first kind of like a bucket item that you should look at. The second thing
Okay.
here is the first contentful paint. So the technical definition is the first feedback to the user that the page is loading. In layman's terms, this is usually how long it's going to take for that first pixel to show on average. And so
Okay.
for this, you want this to be 1.5 seconds or less.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, I did a little screen grab for Spencer Boyce.
Uh-huh.
So the tool I use, and you can definitely go back and look later, is webpagetest.org.
Okay.
Um, so you can see here the first byte time isn't terrible. It's just a little bit over zero point 0.5. And then the first contentful paint, definitely some area for improvement there, room for improvement there, is at 2.7. And
Okay.
so up here you'll see um, kind of some different letter grades. So as you can see, the big things for um, big areas of opportunity are compressing the images, which it makes sense because your site does have it does have rich imagery, and then
Uh-huh.
enabling browser caching.
Okay.
And I'll get into that here in a bit. Now, your overall load time, this is another tool I use. It's called Pingdom. It's at 3.55 seconds. So again, not terrible,
It's
but
so slow.
yeah, definitely some room for improvement. Now, these are, of all of the websites I've looked at over my career, these are usually going to be some of the common culprits that are slowing down your website. So browser
Okay.
caching, going back, that's what you're getting an F for here. Basically, this is the idea that if someone goes to your website for the first time, but then they come back and revisit, it's almost like your browser has kind of stored data. So
Right.
it pretty much it has a jump start as far as loading the
The
page.
load.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But basically, you have to make sure that your website is managing this correctly. So typically, what I do is just install a plugin or two, and I'll share that in the session notes of some of
Okay.
my go-to plugins for this. And usually, that's going to fix the issue with
Okay.
no other like customization needed. The second bullet point here, image compression. So this is basically the idea if your website is rich on images, so you're using a lot of images or you're using images that are really big,
Uh-huh.
as far as file size, you need to compress those images so that they're more efficient when loading. So I
Okay.
would say kind of a general benchmark would be 100 kilobytes or less for each image. However, that's not always possible. Maybe you have like a very rich banner image or very rich infographic or something like that you're using on a website. You do want to
Uh-huh.
kind of balance the quality of the image with the file size because typically when you compress the image too much, you're going to see a compromise with the quality. So sometimes you might go to a website and the image looks kind of grainy, and that's usually
Yeah.
why it's because they compress the image too much.
So is
Um,
that something that you can do a plugin and it automatically does that, or is that something I have to consider every time I upload a photo?
yeah, so my go-to plugin for image compression is called Smush.
Okay.
There's
I love that.
basically, yeah, it's a pretty good name, right? Basically, it's a free version and a paid version. The paid version, there are more features. So that's the automated way
Okay.
to compress images, and that should do its job. I would say 80 to 90% of the time. But you're
Okay.
gonna have like certain cases where Smush, it compresses the image too much. So if you look at it on the front end, it's going to look very low quality. And so
Okay.
for those cases, you're going to want to try to do the compression manually. So you can use, I'm not sure if you're on a Mac or a PC, but you
Yeah,
can
I'm on a
use,
Mac.
you're on a Mac. So I believe, yeah, whatever is kind of like the built-in image editor,
Uh-huh.
what you can do is
Yeah,
just
I know
like,
I can downsize stuff.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know actually how to do that. I'm actually
Okay.
trying it.
Yeah, yeah. So I would just say maybe try making the image like reducing the dimensions on the image if possible.
Okay.
It's usually going to be a pretty easy way to do it. Um, yeah, and then just save it. And really, the goal is that you want the file size for the revised image to be less than with the original file size. Maybe you're not always
Right.
going to be able to hit this 100 kilobytes target,
Right.
but that's the goal.
Okay.
Um, the third point here and I believe you're using, oh, actually you're not. I forgot to mention that. So, effective use of a cloud delivery network or content delivery network, I'm sorry. So basically, this is a way to showcase your content very quickly. It's called a content delivery network or CDN for short.
Okay.
And the go-to option, and I love this option because it's free, is Cloudflare. So usually this is going to be done through your hosting or usually it's going to be through your hosting provider. You can reach out to them and say, hey, I want to incorporate a CDN for my website and I want to use Cloudflare. And honestly, in my opinion, they might try to sell you into their CDN program, which you're going to have to pay for. But
Okay.
Cloudflare is usually going to do the trick for you. Now, the setup of this does require that you change some things in your hosting, your name servers. And
Okay.
so for this part, I would recommend kind of just partnering with a developer, just to make sure that you don't screw up anything with, how your name servers are set up. And the
Okay.
reason why is that if you mess that part up, it's going to uh, take your website down, which it won't be
Okay.
accessible. So,
Makes
um,
sense.
yeah, so those are the common issues for site speed. And then for mobile friendliness, so the first thing's pretty straightforward. Just go to Google's mobile friendly testing tool. So if you just Google mobile friendly tests, you should be able to find this tool. But I'll share the URL anyway. And really, this is what you're going for here. Pages mobile friendly.
Okay.
Um, Now the second part here, I use a tool called Moby Ready.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, it looks like it's down today. But another great way to kind of do this test is kind of more of a like a qualitative check. So if you have an iPhone, just manually check your site from time to time to make sure that everything is aligned properly. Like the images look
Okay.
good, the content is wrapping around the images, they look good. And if you have friends or family who have different types of mobile phones, or even if you have an iPad, just look at your website on different devices, just to kind of get a
Okay.
general sense that it looks good. That's kind of like I guess, the non-technical way of doing it, but
Yeah.
it can be a great way to uncover some things you might have missed. Um,
Okay.
and that's pretty much it for the technical piece of session two. Did you have any
Okay.
questions?
I don't. I'm just curious. So when you like are hired as a client to go through and fix people's websites, do all of this, so this is something you're doing on their behalf on an ongoing basis, right? So that's why like a lot of people, obviously SEO is long term, so that's why a lot of people just put do a monthly retainer or whatever to make sure all this is taken care of.
Yes and no. So, I'll kind of go back to, what we covered even before in the first part.
Uh-huh.
So these on-page things that
Yeah.
we went over, usually there's going to be a massive push to fix all of these things during month one or month two. And if you
Okay.
have a huge website, maybe you'll, you know, use a few other months to do the on-page. But
Uh-huh.
after that, it's going to be more so kind of maintenance. So anytime
Gotcha.
you add new content, you want to make sure you follow the on-page part, and just I would say every few months, maybe every 3 to 4 months, you'll just kind of do a like a on-page check to make sure that
Okay.
if there have been any Google algorithm updates, that website is still meeting best practices. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, other than that, I that wouldn't be a reason why you do ongoing. And really the same for this technical stuff. Usually if you can like go in month one or month two and do it right, there's no reason to go
Uh-huh.
back and redo it. Unless again there's been major updates to the website. Usually when the reason why SEO is an ongoing thing, and it's really is dependent on the nature of the campaign.
Uh-huh.
Content is something that you should be doing regularly, and link
Right.
building. Link building is something that you should be doing regularly. So
Right.
when SEOs when they sell a retainer, um, really that's the right reason or right answer why they should be doing is like a monthly thing. But if they don't mention that, then you might want to bring it up.
Okay. No, that
Yeah.
makes sense. And then what else did I have as far as that went? So the other thing, so if you have a client that you're doing their SEO and they are doing blog posts pretty regularly,
hmm
do you teach them how to optimize those posts for SEO, or do you go in once they're done and optimize it?
It depends on the client. I do have some clients that are very hands-on. So maybe
Uh-huh.
at the beginning, we'll kind of just have like a on-page SEO training so that to make sure that, what they're doing matches my standards.
Okay.
Um, yeah, or, they may be, hey, Leonard, I don't want to touch this stuff, and we do all of it for them basically. Um,
Gotcha. So they'll send you like the content and then you go through and do the SEO stuff to it.
exactly, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful. Okay.
All right, so I'm gonna stop this video.